You see a heavy golden bar, you reach out to take it, but something feels off. It shifts the moment you touch it. It turns out to be much lighter than it looks. Your perception changes instantly. What was once heavy and valuable now feels like light, painted plastic. What did you feel in that moment? Probably a lot of things. That's how our brains work. You see an image, you hear a description, and you start to feel it. As designers, our job is to evoke these emotions in the people who interact with our work. Why? Simply because emotions and sensations are incredibly powerful. Plain information is easy to forget. It fades from focus. But when information is tied to multiple senses, touch, taste, smell, it has a much greater chance of leaving a lasting emotional impact. This is the foundation of many mnemonic techniques and is supported by modern research. One of the simplest and most effective ways to engage multiple sensory channels in design is by using textures. Textures trigger recognition. You don't need to describe every detail or have the technical means to replicate an experience perfectly. For instance, you don't need someone to physically feel the cold and wetness of ice in their hand. Simply depicting the texture of ice where the user sees it can evoke the desired emotions. When someone imagines something, their brain processes it almost the same way as if they were actually experiencing it. For the brain, imagining touching raw meat with a finger and actually doing it are almost indistinguishable. Both create a similarly strong tactile impression. This phenomenon works surprisingly well. Textures are a cheat code in design, and we're fortunate. Tools like Midjourney and other AI services can generate stunning textures. However, from my time teaching design at a college, including how to use AI tools, I've seen how designers who start using AI to generate textures often sabotage themselves. They misuse textures or generate them poorly, and as a result, the quality of their design suffers. In this way, Midjourney can turn from a helpful tool into an obstacle. Today, I want to explore with you how to generate textures the right way. We'll look at how to craft prompts, understand which textures work best in different contexts, and apply them effectively. We'll go through 3 levels of understanding texture application, and by the 3rd level, you'll see how textures truly become a designer's cheat code. A powerful way to elevate your design significantly. To reach this advanced level, we need to first understand the meaning behind these levels and how they work. The first level is the general use of material textures in design. I've prepared a few examples to show how textures can improve designs, plus a tutorial on finding the right texture. At the first level, materials and textures add depth and style. This is often a great example for templates, because a template is like a rental apartment. When you move in, you don't want to see traces of someone else's life. You want something neutral with appealing decor, and material textures fulfill this role. For example, consider a portfolio template where textures and materials are used instead of specific work samples. Why do I call this the first level? Because it doesn't add intrinsic value to the template itself, but it makes it more polished and visually interesting. This also includes the direct use of textures to illustrate a concept. Take a website for eco-friendly products. The background uses a recycled paper texture, directly tying into the company's values and activities. Another example is adding a slight noise effect to a white background to make it resemble paper, giving the site a more tangible, real-world feel. When combined with 3-dimensional elements like a physical jar, the design becomes even more engaging. Here's another case. When showcasing a poster, instead of presenting it in isolation, you can add the texture of a real wall. Suddenly, the posters feel like they're truly hanging on a wall, complete with imperfections that add authenticity. This approach makes the design look more alive. Even slightly more complex uses fall into this first level. For instance, in the fashion industry, natural photography, like sand dunes, has been a trend for years. Adding a sand texture to the inside of a cosmetics box immediately gives it a fashionable vibe. As you can see, the first level isn't superficial. The use of textures here is justified and adds something meaningful. It's a step above the 0 level, where textures are used randomly or inappropriately, like adding a wooden background to an unrelated website or using stone textures on blocks in a room for no reason. These can detract from the design rather than enhance it. In contrast, the examples we've discussed at the first level genuinely improve the design and contribute to its overall success. Now let's get into the step-by-step guide for generating textures in Midjourney. I've become quite proficient at this, often creating textures with just a few prompts. But let's approach this as if I'm starting fresh, and we'll go through each stage together to create a texture suitable for a website design. Generative tools like Midjourney often rely on randomness, so starting with a simple approach can yield surprisingly effective results. With minimal effort, you might achieve exactly what you need. For example, I write a prompt for a very light yellow paper texture with small inclusions. I specify that it should be an ultra-realistic close-up photograph. Additionally, I include resolution and stylization parameters. Key details to note: I often use phrases like ultra-realistic close-up photograph to help Midjourney understand the type of texture I'm aiming for. The aspect ratio is specified for clarity. Stylization option is crucial. This parameter is defaulting to 100 and ranging from 0 to 1000 determines how much Midjourney emphasizes style and aesthetics. For textures, higher values can enhance detail and saturation but may introduce unwanted elements like bokeh or vapor-like effects. Adjust this as needed. If the initial result includes issues like perspective or blur, I refine the prompt, adding flat surface and using negative prompts like no blur and no perspective. Ensures the texture aligns with my vision. Through a couple of iterations, I've achieved something closer to the desired texture. However, if it's too yellow, I adjust the prompt further. To avoid problems like rips or overlaps from multiple sheets, I specify a whole sheet in the prompt and include terms like no rapture, no swelling, and no damage in the negative prompt. This ensures a smooth, uniform texture. Next, I address contrast and color by adding phrases like haiku, high-quality recycled paper with small inclusions, low contrast, and almost completely white. The texture becomes more aligned with the design's needs. Once I've generated a suitable texture, I make slight adjustments in Photoshop, such as lightening the image to ensure it's perfect for use as a background. This step-by-step process helps create textures that elevate your design while maintaining consistency and professionalism. Examples of simple prompts for textures: realistic close-up photo of blackstone texture, realistic black marble close-up photo with glowing golden streaks inside, realistic ultra close-up photo of meat texture with salt crystals and pieces of gold foil, a realistic close-up photo of pearl fabric texture. For example, when using the term pearl, the generated texture includes pearlescent sheens that add character. The result looks as though it came straight from a stock photo site. However, unique additions can elevate the textures. For instance, black marble with golden streaks or a meat-like texture with gold foil and salt crystals creates something truly distinctive. While these may seem too elaborate for backgrounds, we're currently focusing on textures as standalone elements. When designing textures for backgrounds, subtler descriptions are often more appropriate. But for clarity and experimentation, we'll use these vivid examples. This brings us to the second level of texture application, creating unique textures. Unlike the first level, which often resembles pre-AI stock imagery, the second level involves adding unique elements that make the textures stand out. For instance, if designing a grass texture, you could make it red, add frost, snow, or frozen tips for uniqueness. Similarly, a glass texture could include added details or an entirely novel concept. Descriptions can go beyond shapes to convey a specific vibe, such as vintage or psychedelic cultural styles. Occasionally, experimentation leads to unexpected results. For example, I once stumbled upon a texture resembling colorful mold by describing it as a puddle with gasoline. The vibrant rainbow-like swirls of gasoline in water inspired the texture, creating something distinctive. This is the essence of the second level, crafting unique textures that stand apart from stock-like results while maintaining relevance and creativity in design. The third level, textures as metaphors. The third level involves using textures not just as unique elements, but as metaphors. Let's explore an example that illustrates this beautifully. Look at this, a graphic design project where the texture looks slightly gritty and noisy, yet it's extremely impactful. The project involves children's toys, and the sand texture used isn't just any sand, it's rubber-like and toy-safe. This subtle design choice communicates safety to parents who are naturally concerned about their children's well-being. It transforms the perception of the texture from something ordinary to something deeply reassuring. Another example comes from a project I worked on called Viternal, which focuses on health and longevity. For this project, the core identity was minimalist, but the case presentation on Behance required something striking for a design audience. Initially, we explored textures directly tied to substances, medicines, and laboratories, something from the second level. However, we wanted to incorporate a metaphor to elevate the presentation further. We settled on fragility as a metaphor for health, leading us to experiment with glass. Glass is challenging to use in design. It can look dull or cliched in its raw form. When we tried using broken glass with cracks, it conveyed damage rather than preservation. To refine this, we opted for ribbed glass. The ribbing added uniqueness and a metaphorical layer, suggesting imperfection in a natural and beautiful way. To enhance its appeal, we displayed the ribbed glass on a black background with green and yellow highlights, tying it to the project's interface colors. This subtle integration made the texture visually cohesive and metaphorically rich. We're still refining this case, but the approach shows how textures can support a project conceptually. For example, another recent project involved brainstorming textures entirely based on metaphorical thinking, resulting in designs that resonated deeply with clients. If you want to see this process in action, check out the video showcasing our identity development for OneCraft. It provides a step-by-step walkthrough of how we brainstormed creative solutions to meet client expectations and achieve impactful results. By mastering these levels, basic application, uniqueness, and metaphorical integration, you can transform your designs and create textures that not only enhance visuals, but also evoke strong emotional responses. See you in OneCraft video.